Hey everyone, Erin from the Impatient Gardener coming to you with a sort of regular, kind of everyday garden task, but I thought I might be able to offer some tips for you on that. And that is all about what to do when you get plants from a fellow gardener. I have to be so careful where I kneel in here because this garden is full of little treasures that are just popping up, including a whole collection of little trilliums in here that are just wonderful, and I certainly wouldn't want to squish them at that point. So what I'm doing here is this lovely little clump is one of a clump of snowdrops that a gardener who is a friend sent to me, actually dug up from their own garden and mailed to me, which is especially sweet. You might know that snowdrops actually do much better if you plant them it's called in the green, which means you plant them after they're finished flowering. I have tried planting snowdrop bulbs several times and I have not had much luck, but snowdrops will just proliferate around a garden if you keep moving them around. So the very best way to get more snowdrops is to divide your snowdrops and then plant them at this stage, which is exactly what I'm doing here. But it was just so kind of my friend to send me these. It's one of those little garden treats. So that's it. They're in. I will water them. She actually sent them with the seed heads on, which is fabulous because if those develop, those will create new plants too. Of course, they look a little haggard from being in the mail, but they should be just fine. And so that's, I have no tips about this particular case except that, if you are nice enough to have a friend who will send you things in the mail, just say thanks. Okay, I'm just gonna spread these around and make some nice little pockets of snowdrops, and then I will take care of these little clumps so that hopefully in the future I can fill this whole area up with snowdrops, which would be such a welcome sight early in the season. Well, we're dealing with a bit of garden hair here today, but that's not what we're here to talk about. Look at this trunk load of plants. These all came from my sister-in-law's house. I was just over there digging them up. And of course, this is one of the best reasons to have gardening friends and family because you can share plants, and it is such an economical way to do it. And it's just a really nice, friendly thing to do. So a lot of people get their plants this way, and sometimes it's a friend or a family member or a garden club member. But sometimes it's somebody you find on Facebook who's saying, you can come on over and dig stuff out of my garden, you just have to come dig it. So I thought I'd share a few thoughts on what you should be doing if you're going to be digging plants from someone else's garden. So first of all, the very first thing I would say is do some research. Find out exactly what plant they have, because there are some plants that people want to get rid of, and the reason they want to get rid of them is because they have taken over their garden, and you probably don't want that plant in your garden. So be careful with Passalong plants. Do your own research as to whether that's actually a plant that you want first. Now, these are both plants that I very much wanted. I've got great spots for both of these. So let me show you what these two are. The first one is, well, they're going to be hard to see in these bags, but if you can look in there, and I'll show you these plants whole. This is Ligularia. I think it's Desdemona. I'm pretty sure it's the Desdemona variety. Ligularia is a great plant. It's got really bold, big leaves. It does well in shade. It does well in wet shade, which is exactly the scenario I'm going to put it in. If you put it in too much sun, it will flop during the day and it will usually come back at night, but it'll look pretty pathetic during the day. So a bit of shade is good. This one has purple leaves. There are several varieties, some that have green leaves. Most of them shoot up a yellow flower. Some have kind of an upright flower, which there's one called the Rocket that is quite popular. It has kind of a yellow spire. This one has more of a daisy-like flower. I don't care for the flowers that much. I should say I don't care about the flowers. That's not why I'm growing them. I'm growing them for the foliage. And one of the reasons they are great is because they get really big and they shade out the ground below them, meaning weeds won't grow. So they're great for that. They do spread around a little bit. They'll bulk up, but they also are prolific reseeders. If you don't want it to reseed, you just cut off the flowers or you scrub out the seedlings when you get them. But she's just kind of redoing a whole area, and just these plants had gotten too big. So I've got good spots for these. So this bag right here brings up the next thing I would say. If you are going to go to someone else's house to dig out plants, there's a couple of things you should do just from a etiquette standpoint. The first thing is bring everything you need. Bring your own tools. I had my shovel and another little trowel with me. And then bring something to take the plants away in. Do not expect the person who is giving you plants to provide you with pots or anything like that. In this case, I actually grocery bags work great. And then I also brought my trug to put another plant in, which I'll talk to you about in a second. But just be a good visitor to someone else's garden. And make sure that you bring everything you need so you don't have to ask them to borrow a shovel or use bags or anything like that. Bring everything you need. I'm going to show you the next plant now. This one is actually, I'm really excited about this. I'll try to see if I can find a small, well, this is a big clump. This beauty, and I've got a whole trug of it. This is European ginger, which is one of my very favorite ground covers. It wants some shade. And it does really well at her house. I'm shocked by how well, there was so much of it. She wants it. It just was, she had too much of it. So what a great find that is. But you'll notice here, you see how there's just roots? Don't take anyone's soil either. This is another etiquette kind of thing. You don't want to go into someone's garden and then leave giant holes for them to fill in. So when you're digging plants, shake off all the soil you can. And there's another reason for that too, which we'll get to in a second, but shake off as much soil as you can so that you leave the soil for them, and then rake it out. And try to make it look kind of nice when you're there so you don't leave a big mess for them to have to clean up. Now, of course, if the person whose garden you're digging in gives you different directions, you just do whatever they tell you. You follow what they do. So when I came over, she showed me where this clump was, and she said, okay, I don't need from here to here. And so I had her outline for me exactly the area she wanted me to take, and that's where I dug. So the other thing is, make sure when you go to someone's house to dig up plants that you know exactly where they would like you to dig plants and remove plants. And exactly which plants you're supposed to be taking. So this was right next to a heuchera, and she pointed out the heuchera, and I just made sure, in fact, that's one of the reasons she wanted this out. It was kind of crowding out the heuchera. So I went in there and made sure that I was very careful around that heuchera and made sure the heuchera was all tucked in really well when I left. So those are some other important tips to think about. Is just make sure that you know exactly what you are being invited to take. Now this clump is a good example of what might happen when you dig in someone else's garden. So there's a bunch of scilla, what is that, scilla? It is this pretty little spring flower, but this is pretty invasive, and no one who has it probably has it in their garden. So, on purpose. A lot of people plant this and think they want it, and then it sort of takes over. It's not the worst thing that you could have along as a rider, but you should be aware of it. So what you can do before if you don't want this in your garden, is go through, just take it for now, assuming they don't want you to leave it behind. Take it for now, and once you get it and you divide this plant, then you can work out whatever you want. So that brings me to the next point, which is why you might want to think about washing the roots. So one of the things you want to think about when you're digging plants from another person's garden is what their garden might have that you may not want. In addition to little riders of weeds that you can see, soil can harbor invasive species. It can harbor a little bit of roots from other weeds that you may not want to introduce into your garden. So if you have a concern about one of those things being in that person's garden, or you don't know that person or are not familiar with what is in their area, you might want to think about washing the roots. So I just have a trug of water here, and most of the time you can just sort of, you want to get in there and work it out a little bit. What you're trying to do here is remove all bits of soil from those roots. That is what washing roots is. And then you can go through and take a peek. So as I look in here, I see these little guys, which might be little seedlings of ginger. It could also be, she has a lot of sweet woodruff in her garden, which I have in my garden and I quite like. So I don't mind that at all, but it's something to be aware of. So The other thing that we have here is we have an invasive species of worms, and eggs can be present on soil. So this is another thing that you want to think about washing roots for. Of course, you don't have to do this if you don't have a reason to suspect there being an issue, but I think it's not a bad practice to get into. And I'm not suggesting that you're going to be able to get every little thing out of these, but I think you increase your odds of having a good outcome and not having anything bad happen by doing that. So that's all nice and washed off. So that's you can see the difference between the bunch that I washed and the bunch that I didn't wash. And I've just got a crate over here that I'm going to line these up, and I will divide them as I plant. The other thing you want to think about when you're going to be digging from another person's garden is the time of day. Ideally, the best case scenario is that you can go dig from someone's garden and then come home and immediately plant those plants. They will, you know, not notice a lot if you can sort of sneak them in quickly, especially since you're not going to be bringing them home with much soil on them, because you're going to be a good person. You're going to leave your friend's soil behind for them. So ideally, you can just go straight from one garden to the other garden, maybe with a pit stop for something like this. But if you can't do that, you obviously have to do something. You can't just leave plants laying around like this. You might be able to push it for a day in a plastic bag. But remember, anytime roots are exposed to air, that's not a good thing. So what you want to do then is you might have to come home, you might have to pot these up. Even if you can't get them in their final location for a day, you might have to just sink them in the ground somewhere. You don't have to plant them well, but you got to get those roots in the soil. So there's another bunch of that. And then I'm going to do one of the ligularias just so you can see that. So these ligularias were growing in a really clay soil place, so it was harder to get the soil off. And actually, I think this is one that she dug for me. She was less concerned about getting the soil off than I was. So could take a little bit to get some of this out because it's really in there. Now, of course, she didn't cut any of this back. That's all fine. But I think you can see, if you can look past, how pretty those are. And these leaves are sort of an olive green on top and sort of a purple on the bottom, but they usually purple up or turn more purple. And ligularia is so tough that, like, you can see some of the roots have just been cut pretty aggressively. That won't bother it at all. Oh, and I'm doing all this in the shade because obviously there's a lot of roots left out there. So I think it's better for them to not be sitting in the sun. But obviously the next step here is to just get these all on the ground. Okay, so I'm gonna finish up working on these, and it'll be a good part of the day spent getting these replanted. But you know, when you're getting a bunch of free plants that you want, you know, the price you're paying is your time. You're investing your time, and that's a pretty small price to pay. I would conservatively guess that I have, once I divide the ligularia, I probably have 20 of those, maybe more. And these can be divided into small clumps. Okay, so that's it. That was just a really quick video, just you know, some thoughts on how to be a good gardener when you're getting plants from someone else's garden. I hope that was helpful to you, and I hope you have some gardening friends that you can share your garden with. You guys have a great day in your garden or your friend's garden. See you soon.